Welcome to Dalligan Talks NRL, and he talks it with the professor. Good evening, Paul.
Good evening, Professor. How are you?
Very well, and if we thought the NRL was settled after round one, plenty of upsets in round two showing it'll be a very, very even year.
Well, I'll tell you this: that the price of loyalty is how I'll kick this off because I might have shared with you off air. I've never won a tipping comp in my life, I don't think, because I always tip my Rabbitohs, and it's been over 40 years, mostly of misery. And last weekend, I didn't think we'd beat the Dragons, so I went out and, against my heart, tipped the Dragons, and guess what happened? The Rabbitohs won. So I'm happy about it, but at the same time, I'm not happy that I tipped us to lose because it's not something I do often. I can tell you, like silence, not one of my best traits, tipping the Rabbitohs to lose. But we're happy with the win.
Well, Paul, I must say that I went and had a look at the tape, and in fairness, you did say you'd be surprised if they won. Let's call it a draw.
It was very close, 1 point in the end. And the amazing thing is this, and I think we're learning this in this code as much as any others. There's stars in every team, but it's the people that step up when the stars aren't available. And with the Rabbitohs obviously missing our two best players, I think, in Cameron Murray and Latrell Mitchell, we've got a guy who most people hadn't heard of, Humphreys, our number 7, who's keeping our $800,000 a year, if you don't mind, English halfback in reserves. And I've asked Manly mates how they let him go, and they're not sure either. But Humphreys stepped up. One thing Wayne Bennett does is get the best out of his troops. And he played, I don't know if you saw the game, Professor, but he played Humphreys like he'd been around for 10 years. So I'm very impressed with this guy. Very similar to Chad Townsend beating, for the Roosters, beating the Panthers, one of the biggest upsets in 10 years. I think we're learning about the NRL. It's not your stars, it's those that step up when they need to. And my word, that man did very, very much like, I mean, it was unbelievable the way he stepped up in that field goal. It wasn't the prettiest field goal you'd ever see, Professor, but it went over, and that's all that counts.
Well, the thing that I was surprised by, Paul, was it seemed to take the Dragons by surprise.
Well, that's the thing. He's not a known player, and I'm sure that they set up their defence on the known players that we had, and they weren't expecting him, neither was I, to slot that on his left foot. I can't even tell you which way he normally kicks his field goals. He's that new to me and the Rabbitohs, but he showed that he's a player of the future. And if we look at the sort of deals that are being thrown around, if Dylan Brown's worth $1.3 million a year, this Humphreys kid is going to be looking at well over the $500,000 mark, and he's only just started. And then this is the thing, we got him under Manly's clutches. I still don't know how they let him go.
Certainly a great pickup for the Rabbitohs. Now, I'm sure Kevin Yapp's wondering when the Dragons are going to win because, Paul, they've lost their first two games. They wouldn't want to lose too many more. Otherwise, they won't be seeing finals come the end of the season.
And I'll tell you this, in our profession, Professor, we've worked with some certain angry people, but that Flanagan, I wouldn't want to get on his wrong side. He's already looking annoyed, and he's had to do what. And I think about coaching, it's not as much about football; it's about personality management. Flanagan, after that loss, came out and openly blasted his players. I've never liked that and never will. And he's had to step back and say in the media that I'm sorry for that I went a bit overboard with my spray. I'm all for passion, but what I never like in any profession is a manager or a coach, in this case, blasting his players. And that's what Flanagan did. That's not going to help him win that dressing room over, I can tell you that much. So I would have, if I was a stockbroker, I would have a sell marker on the Dragons because the coach is very close to losing that dressing room.
The Super Coach, 2-zip.
That's it. So what can I say? He didn't say much in the press conference afterwards. He never does, but he's Yoda-esque, is Wayne Bennett, and I'll take the 2-0. I didn't expect it, but I'll take it.
All right. The Sharks got back on the winners list, accounting for the Cowboys, who are very disappointing. Winger Samuel Stonestreet got a double.
He did, and he's a good Cronulla junior where I grew up, the Shire, so good luck to him. I think you can have your Sportsfan Stan red pen out, like the top of your shirt there, Professor. Get that pen ready and get it through the Cowboys. We can do it after week 2.
Craig Fitzgibbon looked a lot happier.
He did, and I still stand by my Sharks tip for the grand final. I'm leaning a bit more towards marking the Storm a bit high, but we'll get to that. But the next game, I do want to talk about the Broncos bubble burst. So whether that's just a tough loss away at Canberra, which used to be a fortress and perhaps has become that again, or whether it's bad signs for the Broncos, who knows? But we all got sucked into that Broncos juggernaut, as did I, who tipped them to win the comp. So we'll see what happens there.
Well, the bookies, as I said on the last program, Paul, had the line at 13.5. Could have taken the Raiders and would have won easily.
You would have won easy, and you would have been better than what Paul Keating said about Canberra. If you want a friend in Canberra, buy a dog. You would have had a lot of money to spend if you were on board the Raiders in Canberra for that match on the day. But I tell you what, the next game was the feel-good story, and I really love this team, and I tipped them to do well as the West Tigers. I really enjoy the start to the year. They were very unlucky in week one. They were very unfairly criticised for that. And I will get into it early, Professor. The Tigers as outsiders in week 3 is almost a giraffe guarantee. I don't give them out often, but I'm ready to call the Tigers a special in week 3. So we'll get to that shortly. But get your red pen out, and you've already had it out from earlier. Put it through the Eels as well. I did predict they'd have a tough year. Keep that red texture out. The Eels are done.
Well,
put a fork in them.
I think if we're looking at predictions, Paul, I think I can safely say 2 things. The Eels are the worst team in the NRL at present, and West Tigers won't finish on the bottom this season.
They certainly won't, and they're pushing at the top 8. I don't think I tipped them to make the 8 from memory, but they were very close in my marking. But the game you do want to talk about is the Dogs beating the Titans. They are going to be the most unpredictable team in the comp this year, not the Dogs, but the Titans. They can do it all on their day. You must have had some nervous moments there, Professor, in that game, because it was looking like a tough loss and the sort of match the Dogs would have lost in years gone by, but the Dogs held on.
Well, the Dogs got 4 tries in the first 19 minutes. I thought the game was all over, and then back came the Titans.
They did in a big way, and they have a lot of potential. They're one of the best forward packs in the game. An ex-Dogs coach there, but I really just disappointed by their start. But your Dogs are something special. The big difference, though, difficulty for you next week is you've lost Matt Burton and Kiko, so probably your best half and your best forward. So let's see what your depth is like. And again, rugby league comps are one on depth. They're not one on stars. So let's see who steps up.
And Bulldogs at Belmore, unstoppable. 18,000 patrons in attendance.
And most of them on their horn after the match, I've heard. It was pretty noisy around the ground. I love Belmore. I was born about 1 kilometre from there, if you don't mind. So I probably should be a Dogs fan like yourself. But it's good to see the Dogs doing well, as it is seeing the Tigers do well, because it's been quite a while since you've been able to say those two teams are playing well.
Matt Burton's got a low-grade knee injury, Paul, and Stephen Crichton, I noticed, took over the kicking duties when he had to go off.
He did, but Burton's one of your superstars. It'll come down to your fringe players, and they'll have to step up, much like they have at other clubs. I really feel it's a shame for you boys, though, because they were building momentum around particularly those 2 players. So we'll see what happens.
Paul, just going back to the Eels, West Tigers, after watching the first 20 minutes of that game, I almost turned off. It looked like neither team wanted to score.
Well, the West Tigers are probably burnt by those years of being so bad with the wooden spoon. They perhaps aren't yet unleashing their full potential, but I think they'll get there. I think they've been enlivened with Jerome Luai's arrival. They will, I pretty comfortably say this, and I'm happy to stand by this next week, that the Tigers will win at the Dolphins this week.
All right, well, let's look at round 3. Thursday night, Paul, a real, as Fiorenti would say, a mouth-watering tie. Storm against the Panthers, a replay of last year's grand final.
Well, I'm looking at the odds now, $1.30 for the Storm against $3.50 nearly for the Panthers. The only reason for that is the job that the Roosters did on the Panthers. Perhaps all those years, and we say this every year, those years of winning is coming back to haunt them. But that Storm team, my word, they've been impressive, and they're premiership favourites for a reason. I would not be thinking anyone's rushing to back the Panthers down here on Thursday night.
Storm got a very good team, and they're coming off the bye, so they'll be fresh. Do you think last week's game, the Roosters put up a lot of bombs, about 12, I think, and that caused 3 errors, which led to Roosters tries. Do you think Craig Bellamy was watching the tape on that?
He might have been. He'll be expecting more bombs than Dresden, I think. But we will see. He'll be ready, though. Don't worry about that. He's the first in the door. I still here at the Storm headquarters and last out. So no one works harder than Craig Bellamy. He'll be very well prepared. I'm looking at that team and it scares me. I mean, Pappenhausen, Munster, Hughes, Harry Grant. I mean, that's just the start of it. They've added Tukamanu from the Tigers. It is a phenomenal team. Tyron Wishart on the bench, when they're talking about 1.3 million for Dylan Brown, there's going to be similar money thrown around for Tyron Wishart. He's going to face that conundrum that most Storm stars do. Do they stay with one of the best coaches of all time and win premierships, or do they take the $1 million elsewhere? That's how good Tyron Wishart is. The fact he's on the bench is just, it's amazing. And I think the Panthers are going to be up against it.
Well, and you look at Jerome Hughes, he couldn't get a contract with the Titans. So just what would the Titans be thinking about that now?
Well, they'd love him steering the team around the park. Best player in the game last year, and I think not far off it this year. That Storm team is absolutely frightening. And I think they're just going to get shorter and shorter odds as each week goes by. I didn't tip them to make the grand final, but Broncos and Sharks will have to be at their game. That is the new benchmark for the NRL, the Storm.
Friday night, the first game, Paul, the Warriors playing the Roosters. The Roosters back into form against Penrith. Warriors, who can put a line through that form?
Well, they're the most unpredictable team, I think, in world sports, the Warriors, and they make a 6-year-old with ADHD look predictable. So I honestly don't know what you're going to get from the Warriors. They will win, though, at home against the Roosters. I'm pretty sure about that. I think the Roosters gave it their all last week, and it was admirable. It was probably the biggest upset in 10 years, but I don't know if they'll do it again. I think you can confidently say the Warriors will win that game.
The late game, the Broncos, very disappointing down at the Raiders, playing the Cowboys, who we've already put a red line through.
Yeah, Broncos will win that, and they'll win it easily. I think there's a real issue at the Cowboys. I think the coach has lost the dressing room, and it's a very strange strategy. He's got some superstars playing reserve grade, maybe to teach them a lesson, but they need them back on deck because the season's going to be over, as is his coaching career very soon.
Bad time to lose the dressing room after only 2 rounds.
Well, it might have been coming for some time. It's a very tough time there, and they don't muck around in the Cowboys. So Todd Payton, I want to be on his seat. It's very hot.
All right, Super Saturday. The entree involves your team. The Sharkies down at the Shire against your Rabbitohs.
I used to go there every year in my Smith's Chris jersey, and I can tell you it wasn't a fun experience. Cans of bourbon and Coke thrown at me, and they were full ones too, I can tell you, in the Smith's Chris. When a Sharks fan's throwing a full can of bourbon and Coke, you know it's a pretty serious grudge. I don't hold much hope for us winning there at $6, by the way. So I don't think we'll do what we did against the Dragons. I hate to say it. I don't even want to tip it. If you don't mind, could we skip to the next one?
All right, the main course. The Dolphins, who've been very disappointing after the Supercoach left the club, playing probably the most exciting team from last week, the West Tigers.
Well, they are already given it the giraffe guarantee at $2. I don't know if I've ever done this on this program's history, but I recommend punters getting on the Tigers. That 6 and 7 of Lockie Galvin, who's the best young player in the game, with Jerome Luai. You've got Terrell May, who is one of the biggest losses. I don't know why the Roosters let him go. He would make the Dally M team of the year at the moment, the way he's playing. Jareen Buller at the back, phenomenal. Adam Dewey is absolutely gun player. So I can see the Tigers winning this quite well.
And the nightcap, the Titans, very disappointing against the Bulldogs, playing the Knights, who have won 2 games and a bit of a surprise packet, I think.
Yeah, I don't like the Titans at all. I think the Knights are good. They rely too heavily on Kalen Ponga. That's why they went out and bought Dylan Brown at astronomical, eye-watering price. But I think the Knights will win. But my God, that's roll the dice stuff, that game.
Sunday, we've got the Eels, who, as I've said, I think are the worst team in the NRL at the moment, playing my Bulldogs. Now, from days gone by, Parramatta playing Canterbury, huge grudge match. I don't think so much today.
Well, I think it will be for this reason. As the Eels, I think, and they should know that this is a very tight competition. If they lose 3 in a row, they're gone. So that might be the only thing that'll save them. They'll give it their all. The fans were booing Dylan Brown. I don't really have much to say about that. The guy who would knock back a contract of that size, I'm all about loyalty, but at the same time, he wanted the security of the 10-year deal. So I think it was a bit harsh, the fans booing him. I think, though, that has disrupted the team, losing one of the best players. It doesn't show a great sign of loyalty in the team. Thankfully, the AFL doesn't have that where a player mid-season elects to sign with someone else. It's really destabilised the Eels. I think the Dogs will be good there.
Well, he was booed when he was introduced last week, and I think that's just going to keep going for the rest of the season.
Well, it will, quite sadly. And I feel for the Eels because they've done a lot for him. They stood by him in tough times. But at the same time, a 10-year deal and money talks, unfortunately. So it's business. So the fans don't like it, but that is what it is. It won't help the team, though.
All right, Paul, the final game this weekend for decision, the 6:15 game at Fortress Brookvale, and Schooner will be very interested in this one. His Sea Eagles playing the Raiders. The Raiders are on top of the world at the moment, second on the ladder. But the Sea Eagles, with possible injuries to Cherry Evans and Tommy Turbo, they might not line up in the side. If they don't line up, I think it's a foregone conclusion the Raiders will win.
As of now, they're named, and I think Manly wins. But if you take Turbo and Cherry out of that team, the Raiders will be probably favourites. So it all turns on that. If they're playing, which I think they will, Manly should win at home.
All right, Paul. Thanks very much for talking rugby league with me again this week, and I'll look forward to looking through all these results, and we'll chat about what happened in round 3 next week.
All good. Thank you. Go the Dogs.